The phone rang at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew before I even picked it up that my life was about to change forever. Before we continue, please write in the comments which country you're listening from. Enjoy the story. My name is Dorothy, Washington, and for the past 3 years since my husband passed, I've been living what everyone thinks is a quiet, simple life. My daughter Sandra was calling, and from her tone, I could already tell she had that familiar edge. The one she gets when she needs something but doesn't want to admit it. "Mom, I have some news," Sandra said, her voice tight. I could hear her pacing in that expensive apartment of hers, the one with the marble countertops she loves to show off in her social media posts. "I lost my job today. They're doing massive layoffs at the tech company." I set down my cup of tea and looked around my modest living room. The same floral couch I'd had for 15 years, the coffee table with the ring stains from countless mugs, the family photos in their simple frames. To Sandra, this was evidence of my limited means. If only she knew the truth. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry to hear that," I said, genuinely concerned, but also curious about where this conversation was heading. "How are you and Brian handling it?" There was a pause. Sandra had always spoken to me in this particular way, not unkind exactly, but with a subtle condescension that suggested she was talking to someone who couldn't quite grasp the complexities of her sophisticated life. Even now, in her moment of crisis, I could hear it. "Well, Mom, it's complicated. We have the mortgage on the house, Brian's consulting work has been slower than expected, and we have obligations. You know how it is." She paused again, and I could practically see her choosing her words carefully. "I mean, I know you've never had to deal with this kind of financial pressure, living so simply and all." There it was. The assumption that my simple life meant a simple mind, that my modest house meant modest means, that because I shopped at discount stores and drove my 10-year-old Honda, I couldn't possibly understand money management or financial stress. I've been hearing variations of this theme for years. When Sandra got married, she made comments about how sweet it was that I was contributing what I could to the wedding, even though my gift was smaller than others. When she bought her first house, she'd say things like, "Don't worry about visiting too often, Mom. I know gas is expensive for you." When she had problems at work, she'd brush off my advice with, "It's different in corporate, Mom. It's not like working at the hospital." Every comment was wrapped in what she thought was kindness, but felt more like pity. Poor Mom, living on her nurse's pension and Social Security. Poor Mom, who never understood the finer things. Poor Mom, who needed to be protected from the harsh realities of real financial responsibility. If Sandra only knew that 3 years ago, when her father died, I discovered he had been quietly building an investment portfolio worth nearly $2 million. Properties, stocks, bonds, life insurance policies, all managed with the help of a financial advisor I never knew existed. My simple mechanic husband had been anything but simple when it came to money. But I made a conscious choice to keep that information to myself. I wanted to see who people really were when they thought I had nothing to offer them. I wanted to understand the true nature of my relationships without the complication of money changing how people treated me. And now, as I listened to Sandra's voice getting more strained, I realized this might be the most important test of all. "The thing is, Mom," Sandra continued, "I might need to ask for some help. I know you don't have much, but maybe you have some savings or something? Even a small amount would help us get through the next few months." I closed my eyes and felt something shift inside me. My own daughter was preparing to ask me for money while simultaneously insulting my intelligence and dismissing my capabilities. She was about to discover that the woman she thought she understood so well was full of surprises. "Let me think about what I might be able to do," I said calmly. "Why don't you come over this weekend? We can talk about it properly." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my simple living room again. But this time, instead of seeing limitation, I saw strategy. Instead of seeing modesty, I saw wisdom. My daughter was about to learn that her mother was far more complex than she'd ever imagined, and I was about to find out what kind of person my daughter really was when she thought she held all the cards. After I hung up the phone, memories flooded, back like pages turning in an old photo album. Sandra's condescending tone wasn't new. It had been building for years, so gradually that I sometimes wondered if I was imagining it. I remember when she graduated college with her marketing degree. I was so proud, working double shifts at the hospital to help with her expenses. But at her graduation party, I overheard her talking to her friends. "My mom's sweet," she said, "but she doesn't really understand the corporate world. She's been a nurse her whole life, you know? Very basic. The word stung then, and it still stings now. When Sandra got engaged to Brian, she asked me to help with the wedding planning, but every suggestion I made was met with a patronizing smile. "Oh, Mom, that's cute, but we're going for something more sophisticated." When I offered to contribute financially, she said, "Don't worry about it. Just give what you can. We know money's tight for you." I gave them $5,000, a significant amount from what she thought was my limited budget. She hugged me and said, "This is so generous for someone on a nurse's pension." The way she said it made my contribution sound like a child's offering of pocket change. During the wedding planning, Sandra would often redirect conversations when they got too detailed about costs. "Mom, you don't need to worry about these things. It's really complicated." As if I couldn't understand that flowers cost money or that venues had different price points. After the wedding, the pattern continued. When Sandra and Brian bought their first house, she gave me the tour with running commentary clearly designed to manage my expectations. "I know it probably seems extravagant to you, Mom, but Brian's job requires a certain image." She showed me the marble kitchen island and said, "I bet this cost more than you spend on groceries in a year." She wasn't trying to be cruel. In her mind, she was being considerate, managing my feelings about what she perceived as my limitations. When I suggested she might want to start saving more money instead of dining out so frequently, she laughed. "Mom, you're so practical, but we work hard and we deserve to enjoy life. You wouldn't understand the pressure we're under." When I mentioned that I'd learned about investment strategies, she patted my hand and said, "That's sweet that you're trying to learn about finances." The most painful moment came 2 years ago when Sandra was complaining about her job stress. I offered advice based on my experience managing difficult situations with doctors and administrators at the hospital. She sighed and said, "Mom, I love that you want to help, but what I'm dealing with is different. It's not like working with patients, it's strategic, complex business decisions." As if nursing wasn't strategic. As if managing life and death situations while dealing with insurance companies, families, and medical bureaucracy wasn't complex. Every birthday card she sent had messages like, "Thanks for always being so content with the simple things in life." Every Christmas visit included comments about how cozy and humble my house was. When she posted about her vacations on social media, she'd call me afterward to describe them, always adding, "I know you're happy just staying home, but I wanted to share." She created an entire narrative about who I was, the simple, content, limited mother who needed protection from life's complexities, and I let her build that narrative because I wanted to see where it would lead. But there were moments when I glimpsed something else in Sandra, a competitiveness almost. When her friend's mother started a successful small business, Sandra seemed uncomfortable. "Not everyone can be entrepreneurial like that," she told me. "Some people are just meant for steadier, simpler lives." When another friend mentioned her mother's investment success, Sandra quickly changed the subject. It was as if she needed me to remain in my assigned role of the financially naive mother who needed her guidance and protection. The irony wasn't lost on me. While Sandra was building her image as the successful daughter with the sophisticated lifestyle, I was quietly learning about compound interest, market diversification, and property management. While she was spending freely and assuming I worried about grocery bills, I was watching my portfolio grow and receiving rental income from properties she didn't even know existed. My husband had left me more than money. He'd left me the freedom to observe human nature without the distortion of financial dependence. And what I observed about my own daughter was both enlightening and heartbreaking. She needed me to be limited so she could feel unlimited. She needed me to be simple so she could feel sophisticated. She needed me to be financially naive so she could feel financially savvy. Now, facing her first real financial crisis, she was turning to the mother she'd spent years defining as having nothing substantial to offer. I wondered what would happen when she discovered just how wrong she'd been. Still remember the day everything changed. It was 3 weeks after my husband James's funeral, and I was sitting in a lawyer's office that smelled like old leather and coffee. Mr. Peterson, James's attorney, had called me in for what I thought would be a routine reading of a simple will. Mrs. Washington, he said, sliding a thick folder across his mahogany desk. Your husband was quite a remarkable man, much more financially astute than most people realized. I opened the folder with trembling hands, expecting to see our modest savings, account, and maybe the deed to our house. Instead, I found documents I didn't even recognize: investment portfolios, property deeds, insurance policies, stock certificates, page after page of financial instruments with numbers that made my head spin. I don't understand, I whispered, staring at a bank statement that showed a balance of over $400,000 in an account I'd never heard of. Mr. Peterson leaned forward with a gentle smile. Your husband began investing seriously about 20 years ago. He started small, just a few $100s here and there, but he was disciplined, consistent, and surprisingly good at picking solid investments. He pulled out a property deed. This is for the duplex on Maple Street. He bought it 15 years ago, renovated it himself on weekends, and it's been generating rental income ever since. Then there's the small apartment building on Oak Avenue, 4 units, all consistently rented. My James, who came home every day with grease under his fingernails, talking about carburetors and brake pads, had been building a real estate empire while I thought we were just getting by. The life insurance policies alone total $800,000, Mr. Peterson continued, and his stock portfolio, well, he had quite an eye for technology companies and blue-chip stocks. He reinvested all the dividends for years. I felt like I was learning about a stranger. But he never said anything. We lived so simply. I worked extra shifts to help with Sandra's college expenses while he was building your financial security, Mr. Peterson finished. He told me once that he wanted you to never have to worry about money, but he also didn't want wealth to change how people treated you or Sandra. He said you were both perfect, just as you were. The total was staggering. Nearly $2 million in combined assets, properties, investments, insurance, and savings. I was instantly wealthy, and nobody knew except this lawyer and me. What do I do now? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. Whatever you want, he said. But I'd suggest taking some time to process this. Your husband left detailed instructions about managing everything. He even arranged for you to work with his financial advisor, Margaret Chen, if you choose to. That night, I sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where James and I had worried about Sandra's tuition payments, where we'd clipped coupons and planned grocery trips carefully. The irony was almost painful. We could have afforded anything, but we'd chosen to live modestly. Over the following weeks, I met with Margaret Chen, James's financial advisor. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who had helped James build his wealth methodically over 2 decades. Your husband was one of my most disciplined clients, she told me. Never panicked during market downturns, never got greedy during booms. He understood that real wealth is built slowly and protected carefully. She showed me spreadsheets tracking every investment, every property improvement, every dividend payment. James had approached wealth building like he approached engine repair. Methodically, patiently, with attention to detail. He specifically asked me to teach you everything if something happened to him, Margaret said. He wanted you to understand not just what you had, but how to protect and grow it. I made a decision that surprised even me. I would keep the inheritance completely secret, at least for now. I would continue living in the same house, driving the same car, shopping at the same stores. I wanted to see how people treated me when they thought I had nothing versus how they might treat me if they knew I had everything. The rental properties were managed by a property management company James had hired years earlier. The dividends and investment income went into accounts I accessed online. I learned about asset allocation, tax strategies, and estate planning. I discovered I had a natural aptitude for understanding financial documents that Sandra assumed were beyond my comprehension. Every month, I received statements showing my net worth growing. Every month, I made decisions about reinvestments and property improvements. And every month, I lived the same simple life that everyone expected from poor Dorothy. When Sandra made her comments about my limited understanding of financial complexity, I would sometimes pull up my investment accounts on my laptop after she left. The irony was delicious and painful at the same time. I could have paid for her entire wedding without touching the principal of my investments. I could have bought her house as a cash gift. I could have funded her lifestyle for years without even noticing the expense. But I was learning something invaluable about human nature, about my daughter's character, about the difference between who people are when they think you need them versus who they are when they think they need you. Now, 3 years later, Sandra was about to ask me for money. The woman who had spent years treating me like I couldn't understand a stock portfolio was going to request help from someone she assumed lived paycheck to paycheck. The test I'd been unconsciously preparing for was finally about to begin. Saturday arrived with an unseasonably warm October morning. I had spent the week preparing for Sandra's visit, not by cleaning house or cooking special meals, but by organizing my thoughts and, more importantly, my financial documents. Everything was filed neatly in my bedroom closet: statements, property, deeds, investment portfolios, waiting for the right moment. Sandra arrived at 2 p.m. sharp, driving her white BMW SUV that she'd mentioned cost more than most people's annual salary. She parked it carefully in my narrow driveway, and I watched from the window as she checked her reflection in the side mirror before walking to my door. "Hi, Mom," she said, giving me a quick hug that felt more like a social obligation than genuine affection. She was wearing what I'd learned to recognize as her serious conversation outfit: a tailored blazer, expensive jeans, and shoes that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. We settled in my living room, and I served tea in my everyday cups, the mismatched ones I'd collected over years of hospital gift exchanges and church events. Sandra accepted hers with a polite smile that couldn't quite hide her discomfort with my simple surroundings. "So," she began, setting her cup down carefully on a coaster, "I wanted to talk to you about my situation. Brian and I have been doing some calculations, and things are tighter than we initially thought." I nodded encouragingly, watching her choose her words with the same care she'd used to set down her teacup. "The thing is, Mom, we need about $50,000 to get through the next 6 months comfortably. I know that sounds like a lot to you, but with our mortgage, car payments, and other obligations..." She paused, giving me a look that I recognized as her preparing to be understanding expression. $50,000, I repeated quietly. I know, Sandra said quickly, misinterpreting my tone. "It's probably more money than you've ever even thought about having at one time. But here's the thing. We're not asking for charity. This would be a loan. We'd pay you back with interest." She leaned forward, her voice taking on that familiar, condescending gentleness. "I've been thinking about your situation too, Mom. You're getting older, living alone in this house that's probably getting harder to maintain. What if we worked out an arrangement where you could move into our guest room? You'd have company, we could take care of you, and you wouldn't have to worry about house expenses anymore." The offer was presented as a kindness, but I heard the underlying assumption: poor, aging Dorothy would be grateful for the chance to become a dependent in her daughter's household. "We could sell your house," Sandra continued, warming to her theme. I know it's not worth much in this neighborhood, but maybe we could get 30 or 40,000 for it. Combined with whatever savings you might have, it could work out perfectly. For everyone. I sipped my tea slowly, letting her words settle in the air between us. Tell me more about what you mean by obligations, I said. Sandra shifted uncomfortably. Well, adult responsibilities. We have the country club membership, which is important for Brian's networking. There are charity events we need. To attend for my career prospects. We just bought new furniture for the living room because the old stuff was looking dated. She continued listing expenses: premium gym memberships, regular spa treatments, designer clothing for work events, expensive restaurants for client entertainment, and a vacation to Europe they'd booked before Sandra lost her job. I understand these might seem frivolous to someone who's lived simply, she said, but in our world, image matters. We can't just stop everything and live like... She caught herself before finishing the sentence, but I knew how it ended. Live like you. Mom, I need you to understand something, Sandra said, her tone becoming more serious. Brian and I aren't asking for this lightly. We've exhausted other options. We can't ask his parents because they've already helped us before, and asking friends would be embarrassing. The implication hung in the air. Asking me wasn't embarrassing because everyone understood I was already at the bottom of the social hierarchy. What I'm proposing, Sandra continued, is actually an investment in our relationship. If you help us now, when we really need it, we'll remember that. And when you need care as you get older, we'll be in a position to provide it. She reached over and patted my hand. I know 50,000 sounds overwhelming, but you probably have some savings, maybe a small retirement account, possibly some life insurance money from Dad. Even if you could manage 20 or 30,000, it would help so much. I looked down at her manicured hand covering mine. Her wedding ring caught the light, a 2-carat diamond that cost more than most people's cars. Her bracelet was new, something I hadn't seen before, with what looked like real sapphires. And, honestly, Sandra added, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a caring tone, it would be good for you to feel useful again. I know retirement can be isolating, especially for someone who's used to working. This would give you a way to contribute to the family in a meaningful way. The manipulation was so skillful, wrapped in such apparent concern for my well-being, that I almost admired its sophistication. She was offering me the privilege of impoverishing myself to maintain her lifestyle, framing it as an opportunity for purpose and family connection. I set down my teacup and looked directly into my daughter's eyes. Sandra, let me ask you something. What do you think I'm worth? She looked confused. What do you mean? I mean, what do you think my net worth is? What do you think I have in savings, investments, assets? Sandra laughed uncomfortably. Mom, you don't need to worry about impressing me with financial talk. I know you've done the best you could on a nurse's salary. Answer the question. I said gently but firmly. She fidgeted with her bracelet. I don't know. Maybe you have 10 or 15,000 in savings? Maybe the house is worth 40,000? Dad probably had a small life insurance policy. I nodded slowly. In her mind, my entire net worth was less than she was asking to borrow. So you're asking me for more than triple what you think I actually possess. Sandra's face flushed. I thought maybe you could figure something out. Take out a reverse mortgage, or mortgage my house to fund your lifestyle? It's not like that, Mom. It's a temporary loan to family. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at my small front yard where James had planted rose bushes that still bloomed every spring. Behind me, I could feel Sandra growing more anxious with each moment of silence. I need to think about this, I finally said, turning back to face her. How long do you need? Sandra asked quickly. Because we're kind of on a timeline here. I'll let you know soon, I promised. As Sandra gathered her purse and prepared to leave, she gave me another quick hug. Thank you for considering it, Mom. I know it's a lot to ask, But family is family, right? After she left, I sat back down in my living room and pulled out my phone. I had Margaret Chen's number on speed dial now. It was time to start planning. My next move, that evening I called Margaret Chen. She answered on the second ring even though it was Saturday. "Dorothy, how are you? It's been a while since we've spoken." "I need your help with something delicate," I said. "My daughter has asked me for a significant loan, and I want to understand her real financial situation before I make any decisions." Margaret was quiet for a moment. "What kind of help are you looking for?" "The kind that helps me protect both of us from making a mistake." Within 2 days, Margaret had discreetly gathered information that painted a very different picture than the one Sandra had presented. Through her network of financial professionals and a few strategic inquiries, she'd assembled a comprehensive overview of Sandra and Brian's finances. "It's not good," Margaret said when we met at her office on Tuesday morning. She slid a folder across her desk, much like Mr. Peterson had done 3 years earlier, but this time the contents were troubling rather than surprising. "They're not just cash poor because of Sandra's job loss," Margaret explained. "They've been living significantly above their means for at least 2 years. Their credit card debt alone is over $60,000. I opened the folder and saw credit reports, public records, and financial summaries that told a story of systematic overspending and poor financial planning. The country club membership they mentioned? That's $8,000 annually. Their car payments combined are nearly $1,500 per month. The mortgage on their house is $7,300 monthly, which was manageable when Sandra was earning her full salary, but ambitious even then." Margaret pointed to another document. "Here's what's interesting. They've already borrowed against Brian's 401k twice in the past 18 months. They took out a home equity line of credit last year that they've nearly maxed out." I studied the numbers, feeling my stomach tighten. So the $50,000 they're asking for would barely make a dent in their actual debt load. And based on their spending patterns, they'd likely burn through it within 3 months and be back in the same position. Margaret pulled out another sheet. "I also looked into Brian's consulting business. His income has been declining for over a year, not just recently. Several of his major clients haven't renewed their contracts. So they've known this was coming? They should have. The signs were clear months ago." I leaned back in my chair, processing the information. Sandra hadn't just lost her job. She and Brian had been spiraling toward financial disaster for quite some time, and instead of cutting expenses or addressing the root problems, they'd decided to ask me to subsidize their unsustainable lifestyle. "There's more," Margaret said gently. "I found records of some interesting purchases in the past 6 months. A $15,000 kitchen renovation, a $7,000 vacation to Napa Valley, new furniture worth over $20,000. All while knowing their income was unstable? It appears so. And Dorothy, there's something else. You should know. I found evidence that Sandra has been telling people her mother is struggling financially and might need family assistance soon. She's been positioning herself as the responsible daughter who might need to help support her aging mother. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. While I'd been quietly managing a multi-million-dollar portfolio, Sandra had been creating a narrative where she was my potential caregiver rather than someone who might need help herself. "She's been building a story," I said slowly. "Exactly. Which makes me wonder if this loan request is part of a larger plan. If she can get you to liquidate assets or take on debt to help her, it supports her narrative that you're financially vulnerable." Margaret leaned forward. "Dorothy, I have to ask, are you considering giving her the money?" I was quiet for a long moment, watching traffic move past Margaret's office window. "I'm considering teaching her a lesson." "What kind of lesson?" "The kind that helps her understand who her mother really is." Over the next few days, I did my own investigation. I drove past Sandra and Brian's house, noting the new landscaping and expensive outdoor furniture. I looked up the restaurants they'd been posting about on social media, places where dinner for 2 easily cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. I also started paying closer attention to Sandra's social media posts. She'd been presenting a carefully curated image of success and sophistication, but now I could see the desperation behind it. The constant dining out, the designer purchases, the exotic weekend trips. It all looked like someone trying very hard to maintain an image they couldn't actually afford. Most telling were her posts about family. She frequently shared articles about caring for aging parents, always with comments about how important it was to be there for family who sacrificed for you. She'd posted photos of us together with captions like, "My sweet mom who gave me everything. Growing up, now it's my turn to take care of her." She was literally preparing her social circle for the narrative where she'd become my financial caretaker. I called Margaret back on Friday. "I've made a decision," I told her. "What kind of decision?" "I'm going to give Sandra exactly what she's asking for." Margaret was quiet. "Dorothy, we just established that $50,000 won't actually solve their problems." "I'm not talking about the money," I said. "I'm talking about the education. She wants to know what her mother is worth. She's about to find out." "What do you need from me?" "Help me plan a presentation that she'll never forget." As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of being underestimated by someone who was about to discover their mistake. Sandra thought she was manipulating a naive, financially desperate mother. She had no idea she was dealing with a woman who could buy and sell her lifestyle 10 times over without even touching the principal of her investments. I called Sandra on Sunday evening, timing it perfectly for when she'd be anxious about my decision, but trying not to appear too eager. "Hi, honey," I said when she answered. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday." "Oh, Mom, thank you for calling back so quickly," Sandra said, and I could hear the relief in her voice. "Have you had a chance to think about what we discussed?" "I have, and I want to help you, but I also want to make sure we're making smart decisions here." There was a pause. "What do you mean?" "Well, I've been doing some thinking about money management lately. You know how retirement gives you time to learn new things. And I'm wondering if maybe we should talk about your overall financial picture before I commit to anything." Sandra's tone shifted slightly. "Mom, that's sweet that you're interested in learning about finances, but our situation is pretty complex. It's not really something we need to get into detail about." "But honey, if I'm going to help, shouldn't I understand what I'm helping with? For instance, have you considered cutting some of your monthly expenses while you look for work?" "What do you mean?" I kept my voice gentle and curious. "Well, things like the country club membership, or maybe finding a less expensive gym, or cooking at home more often instead of dining out." Sandra laughed, but it sounded forced. "Mom, you don't understand. These aren't just expenses. They're investments in our careers. Brian needs the country club for networking. We need to maintain our professional image." "I see. So these are business expenses?" "Exactly. See, this is why I didn't want to burden you with the details. It's not like managing a household budget." I let that comment hang in the air for a moment. "What about selling some assets? Maybe the BMW could be replaced with something more economical temporarily?" "Mom, please, we've already considered all the obvious options. We're not financial amateurs." Here, her condescension was becoming more pronounced, even as she was asking for my money. I decided to push a little further. "What about that beautiful new furniture I saw when I visited? Could any of that be returned?" "Mother, that furniture was a necessity. Our old living room set was embarrassing. We can't have clients or colleagues over to a house that looks dated." "I understand. And the kitchen renovation?" Sandra's voice got tighter. "That was an investment in the property value. Look, I appreciate that you want to help, but maybe we should focus on what you can contribute rather than second-guessing decisions that are already made." I could feel her patience wearing thin, which was exactly what I wanted. "Of course, dear. I just want to make sure I understand. So you need $50,000 to maintain your current lifestyle while you look for work?" "We need $50,000 to meet our obligations," Sandra corrected. These aren't luxuries, Mom. They're adult responsibilities. I see the distinction. Now, let me ask you something else. Have you thought about what happens if you don't find a job right away? Or if Brian's consulting work doesn't pick up? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But shouldn't we plan for that possibility now? What if the $50,000 isn't enough? Sandra was quiet for a long moment. Are you saying you can't help us? I'm saying I want to help wisely. What if instead of a lump sum loan, I helped you create a budget that would stretch your resources further? A budget? Sandra's voice carried a note of incredulity. Yes, I've been learning about financial planning, and there are some interesting strategies for managing cash flow during transitions. Mom, stop. Sandra's tone was sharp now. I don't need budgeting advice from someone who's never had to manage complex finances. No offense, but clipping coupons and watching grocery store sales isn't the same as strategic financial management. There it was, the mask slipping completely. I'm just trying to be responsible with whatever help I can offer, I said mildly. Look, here's the thing, Sandra said, her voice taking on the patient tone she used when she thought she was explaining something to a child. You've lived simply your entire life. You've never had to think about investment portfolios or tax implications or maintaining professional networks. What Brian and I are dealing with is completely different from anything you've experienced. You're probably right about that, I agreed. So when I say we need $50,000, I'm not asking you to understand why or how we'll use it. I'm asking you to trust that we know what we're doing. Even though you lost your job and are in debt, Sandra's breath caught. We're not in debt. We have temporary cash flow issues. It's completely different. Is it? Yes. Look, Mom, I love you, but you clearly don't understand the difference between being broke and being temporarily illiquid. We have assets, we have earning potential, we have a plan, we just need bridge financing. The financial jargon was flowing now, as if using sophisticated terminology could mask the reality of their situation. Bridge financing, I repeated. Exactly. It's a common business strategy, but I don't expect you to understand the mechanics. I was quiet for a moment, letting her words settle. Sandra, let me ask you one more question. What? If I help you with this $50,000, what makes you think you won't need more money in 6 months? Because I'll have found a new job by then. And if you haven't? I will have. But if you haven't, Sandra's voice rose slightly, then we'll figure something else out. Look, Mom, are you going to help us or not? Because if you can't, I need to explore other options. What other options? I don't know yet. Maybe we'll have to ask you to co-sign a loan, or maybe we'll need to consider that arrangement where you move in with us and we use the proceeds from selling your house. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. Help them now on their terms, or they'd find ways to access my resources anyway. I think I need a little more time to consider everything, I said. How much more time? Just a few days. I want to make sure I'm making the right decision. After I hung up, I sat in my kitchen and smiled. Sandra had just revealed everything I needed to know about her character. She saw me as a resource to be managed, not a person to be respected. She had no interest in my input, my concerns, or my wisdom. But most importantly, she had no idea that the woman she just condescended to could solve her problems with a single bank transfer and never even notice the expense. The real test was just beginning. By Wednesday, Sandra's patience had completely evaporated. She called me 3 times that day, each conversation more desperate and demanding than the last. The first call came at 8 a.m., waking me from a peaceful sleep. Mom, I need an answer, she said without preamble. Brian and I have been talking and we really can't wait much longer. We have payments due next week. Good morning to you too, sweetheart, I said, settling back against my pillows. Don't make jokes, Mom. This is serious. We're talking about our home, our credit, our future. I understand it's serious. That's why I want to make sure any help I provide is truly helpful. 48 hours, Sandra said. That's all the time we can give you to decide. You're giving me a deadline to help you? I'm giving you a timeline based on our reality. If you can't help us, we need to pursue other options immediately. The Hobbs' second call came at lunchtime. I was enjoying a quiet sandwich when my phone rang. Mom, I've been thinking about our conversation, and I realize I may have been too harsh this morning. Oh? I know this is probably the largest financial decision you've ever had to make, and that must be scary for someone who's always lived so modestly. Her tone was artificially sweet now, dripping with condescension disguised as understanding. I want you to know that Brian and I really appreciate that you're considering helping us. We know that $50,000 probably represents most of your life savings. Does it? I asked. Well, doesn't it? I mean, let's be realistic about your financial situation, Mom. You're a retired nurse living on Social Security and whatever small pension you have. Dad was a mechanic. Even if you've been careful with money, how much could you really have saved? The calculation was so casually insulting, so confidently wrong, that I almost laughed. Maybe we should meet in person to discuss this, I suggested. That's a great idea. Why don't you come over to our place tonight? Brian will be home, and we can all talk together. Actually, I'd prefer if you came here. There are some things I want to show you. Show me what? Documents, papers, things that might help you understand my situation better. Sandra was quiet for a moment. What kind of documents? Just come over around 7. We'll talk properly. The third call came at 5 p.m., just as I was preparing for our evening meeting. Mom, I've been doing some research, and I think there might be options you haven't considered. What kind of options? Well, you could take out a reverse mortgage on your house. At your age, you could probably access $30,000 or $40,000 without affecting your monthly income. I gripped the phone tighter. You want me to mortgage my home to give you money? It's not really a mortgage, Mom. It's like unlocking the equity you've built up. And honestly, what do you need all that space for anyway? You're rattling around in that old house all by yourself. I like my house. I know you do, but be practical. You're not getting any younger. What happens if you fall down those stairs? What if you need medical care? Wouldn't it make more sense to liquidate the house equity now while you can still make decisions for yourself? The manipulation was breathtaking. She was painting a picture of my future incompetence to justify her current greed. Sandra, let me ask you something. What? Do you love me? Of course I love you, Mom. That's a silly question. Do you respect me? What do you mean? I mean, do you think I'm intelligent? Do you value my opinions? Do you see me as a capable adult? Mom, where is this coming from? Of course I think you're intelligent. You're just limited by your experiences, that's all. Limited how? You've never had to deal with complex financial situations. You've never had to maintain a professional image or manage investment decisions. That doesn't make you stupid. It just means you don't understand certain things. Like what? Like how money actually works in the real world. Like the difference between assets and liabilities. Like strategic debt management. I was quiet for a long moment, letting her words hang in the air. Mom, are you there? I'm here. Look, I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I need you to trust me on this. Brian and I understand money in ways that you never had to learn. When we say we need $50,000, it's not because we're irresponsible. It's because we understand exactly how to leverage that amount to solve our situation. Leverage? Yes, Mom, leverage, using borrowed money to create opportunities. It's a sophisticated financial strategy. I see. So can we count on your help? Come over tonight, 7 o'clock. And Sandra? Yes? Bring Brian with you, if we're going to discuss sophisticated financial strategies. I want everyone here who's involved in the decision. Okay, but Mom, I hope you're not planning to drag this out much longer. We really need to know tonight. You'll know tonight, I promised. After I hung up, I went upstairs to my bedroom and opened the closet where I kept all my financial documents. I pulled out several folders, arranging them carefully on my dining room table. Bank statements showing balances in the high six figures, investment portfolios, property deeds, insurance policies. Then I called Margaret Chen. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" she asked. "More than ready," I said. "Sandra just told me I don't understand how money works in the real world." Margaret laughed. "Oh, she's going to be surprised." That's putting it mildly. As I arranged the documents on my dining room table, I thought about all the years I'd listened to Sandra's condescending comments about my simple life and limited understanding. Tomorrow night, she was going to discover that her mother understood money better than she ever had. And more importantly, she was going to learn what it meant to truly respect the woman who raised her. Sandra and Brian arrived at exactly 7:00, both dressed as if they were attending a business meeting. Brian wore a crisp navy suit, and Sandra had chosen her most professional-looking dress, the kind she wore when she needed to project authority and competence. "Hi, Mom," Sandra said, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. "You remember Brian, of course." Brian stepped forward with his practiced smile, the one I'd seen him use at family gatherings when he was trying to charm someone. "Mrs. Washington, thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Sandra's told me how generous you're being." I led them into my dining room, where I'd set out coffee and cookies alongside the carefully arranged documents. They both glanced at the papers but didn't pay them much attention, just assumed they were household bills or simple financial statements. "So," Sandra said, settling into her chair, "have you had a chance to think about everything we discussed?" "I have," I said, pouring coffee. "But first I want to understand something better. Brian, Sandra tells me you're having some business difficulties?" Brian shifted uncomfortably. "It's just a temporary slowdown. The consulting market fluctuates, and some clients have delayed projects. Nothing unusual." "What kind of consulting do you do exactly?" "Business optimization, process improvement, strategic planning." He spoke in the vague language of someone who didn't want to be pinned down to specifics. "And how long has business been slow?" Sandra jumped in. "Mom, these kinds of details aren't really relevant to." "I'd like to understand what I'm potentially helping with," I said firmly. "If this is a family discussion about money, then we should be honest about the situation." Brian glanced at Sandra, then back at me. "Maybe 6 months, but it's definitely turning around." "Based on what?" "Excuse me? What makes you confident it's turning around?" "Well, I have several proposals out with potential clients." "How many?" "I'm sorry? How many proposals? With how many clients? For what total value?" The specificity of my questions clearly caught him off guard. Sandra was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "I don't have the exact numbers with me," Brian said. "Approximately? Maybe 4 or 5 proposals. Look, Mrs. Washington, I appreciate your interest, but for how much money total?" Brian was quiet for a moment. "Maybe 30,000 in potential contracts." I nodded. "So if you got every single proposal you've submitted, you'd earn $30,000 over what time period?" 6 months to a year. I let that sink in. "And your monthly expenses are?" Sandra stood up abruptly. "Mom, this is getting way too detailed. We're not here for a financial audit." "Sit down, Sandra." My voice was calm, but carried an authority that surprised all 3 of us. She sat. "If you want me to loan you $50,000, I need to understand your ability to pay it back." "These are reasonable questions." Brian cleared his throat. "Our monthly obligations are about $12,000. $12,000 per month? Give or take. So even if Brian gets every contract he's pursuing, you'd earn maybe $30,000 over the next year, but you need $144,000 just to cover your monthly expenses?" The math hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Neither Sandra nor Brian seemed to have calculated it quite so starkly before. "We'll find other income sources," Sandra said defensively. "Such as?" "I'll get a new job." "Making how much?" "I don't know yet. Hopefully what I was making before, maybe more." "Which was?" $85,000. So between Brian's optimistic projections and your hoped-for salary, You might earn $115,000 next year to cover expenses of $144,000? You're oversimplifying, Brian said. Am I? Help me understand the complexity I'm missing. He fumbled for words. There are tax considerations, potential bonuses, investment returns. What investments? Well, we have some retirement savings. How much? This is ridiculous, Sandra interrupted. Mom, you're treating us like children who don't understand money. I picked up one of the documents from the table, a simple bank statement. Sandra, what does this show? She glanced at it dismissively. A bank statement. Read the balance. Mom, I don't need to. Read it. She looked more carefully, and her expression changed. This says $437,000. That's my checking account. Brian leaned forward. Your checking account? I picked up another document. This is my primary savings account. I slid it across the table. Sandra stared at the statement. $860,000? That's correct. I reached for another folder. These are my investment statements from last quarter. Brian's hands were shaking slightly as he looked at the portfolio summary. Mrs. Washington, this shows over $1 million in stocks and bonds. 1.2 million, to be precise. I pulled out the property deeds. I also own 3 rental properties that generate about $8,000 per month in income. Sandra was staring at me as if I'd transformed into a completely different person. Mom, what is this? This is what your father left me when he died. This is what I've been managing for the past 3 years while you've been explaining to me how money works in the real world. Brian was frantically flipping through statements. Mrs. Washington, according to these documents, your net worth is approaching $2 million, I finished. Give or take. Sandra's face had gone completely white. But you live so simply. You drive an old car. You shop at discount stores. I live below my means, I said. It's called financial discipline, something your father taught me, and something I've been practicing my entire adult life. Why didn't you tell me? Sandra whispered. Because I wanted to see what kind of person you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer you. The silence in the room was deafening. Sandra and Brian sat frozen, trying to process the complete reversal of everything they thought they knew about our family's financial dynamics. So, I said, gathering the documents back into neat piles, now that we all understand each other's financial situations clearly, let's talk about that $50,000 loan. Sandra was the first to break the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. Mom, I don't understand. Why would you hide this from me? I leaned back in my chair, looking at my daughter and son-in-law as if seeing them clearly for the first time in years. Hide it? Sandra, you never asked. You simply assumed. But we're family, Brian said, still clutching the investment statements. Families don't keep secrets like this, don't they? I asked. What about your secret debt, Brian? What about the fact that you've been borrowing against your retirement accounts for months? What about the fact that your business has been failing? For over a year, not 6 months? His face flushed red. How did you... I did my research. Something you might have considered before asking me to mortgage my house to fund your lifestyle. Sandra found her voice again, and with it, her anger. So, this was all a test? You let us humiliate ourselves, asking for help? From someone who could solve our problems without even thinking about it? Yes, I said simply. It was a test, and you failed it spectacularly. That's cruel, Mom. Is it? Let me tell you what's cruel, Sandra. Cruel is spending 3 years listening to your condescending comments about my simple life and limited understanding. Cruel is being told I don't comprehend how money works in the real world by someone who's drowning in debt from buying furniture they couldn't afford. I stood up and walked to the window, then turned back to face them. Cruel is being asked to take out a reverse mortgage on my home to subsidize your country club membership. Cruel is being told that my house is probably only worth $40,000 by someone who's never bothered to check property values in this neighborhood, which, by the way, have increased dramatically since your father and I bought this place. Sandra was crying now, but I wasn't finished. Cruel is listening to my own daughter explain to people that her poor mother might need financial assistance soon, while I'm sitting on assets that could buy her house 3 times over. You knew about that? Sandra asked. I know about a lot of things. I know about your credit card debt. I know about Brian's failed business ventures. I know about the vacation you took to Napa Valley while claiming you needed my help to pay your mortgage. Brian slumped in his chair. Mrs. Washington, we had no idea. Of course you didn't, because you never asked. You never showed any interest in who I really was or what I was capable of. You created a narrative where I was the simple, limited mother who needed your protection and guidance, and you never questioned whether that narrative was true. I sat back down at the table, placing my hands on the stack of documents. Sandra, do you remember when you graduated college? I worked double shifts for months to help pay for your expenses. You thanked me by telling your friends I was basic and didn't understand the corporate world. I was young and stupid. You were 22, old enough to show basic respect. And it didn't stop there. Every family gathering, every phone call, every visit has been punctuated by your subtle reminders of my supposed limitations. I picked up one of the property deeds. This duplex on Maple Street? Your father bought it 15 years ago. The rental income from this one property alone would cover your monthly mortgage payment. But you never asked about our investments. You assumed we had none. How were we supposed to know? Brian asked defensively. By treating me like an intelligent adult instead of a charity case. By asking questions instead of making assumptions. By showing some interest in my life beyond what you could get from it. Sandra wiped her eyes. So what happens now? Are you going to help us or not? That depends. On what? On whether you're capable of fundamental change. On whether you can treat me with the respect I deserve instead of the condescension I've been receiving. I pulled out a folder I hadn't shown them yet. This contains a complete financial analysis of your situation, prepared by my financial advisor. Yes, Sandra, I have a financial advisor. Her name is Margaret Chen, and she's been managing investments for 20 years. Brian reached for the folder with shaking hands. According to Margaret's analysis, your total debt exceeds $90,000. Your monthly expenses are completely unsustainable given your actual earning potential. The $50,000 you asked for would delay your financial collapse by maybe 3 months. So you won't help us? Sandra asked. I didn't say that. But if I help you, it won't be on the terms you originally proposed. I opened the folder and pulled out a detailed financial plan. If you want my assistance, here are my conditions. First, you'll work with Margaret to create a realistic budget and debt repayment plan. Second, you'll sell the BMW and buy a reliable used car. Third, you'll cancel the country club membership and any other luxury services immediately. Sandra started to protest, but I held up my hand. Fourth, you'll move out of your current house and into something you can actually afford. Fifth, Brian will close his consulting business and find steady employment. And sixth, you'll both attend financial counseling to learn how to manage money responsibly. Those conditions are ridiculous, Brian said. Those conditions are reality-based, which is more than I can say for your lifestyle choices. Sandra was staring at me as if I'd become a completely different person. Mom, you're talking like you're in charge of our lives. I am in charge of my money. And if you want access to it, you'll follow my rules. And if we don't? I smiled for the first time since they'd arrived. Then you'll figure out your financial problems the same way everyone else does, by facing the consequences of your choices. The room was silent except for the ticking of the old clock on my mantel. Sandra and Brian looked at each other, then back at me, clearly struggling to process this complete reversal of power dynamics. I need to think about this, Sandra finally said. Take all the time you need, I replied. But understand something. The woman you thought you knew, the one you could manipulate with guilt and condescension? She never existed. I'm your mother. But I'm also a financially independent woman who doesn't need anything from either of you. So that's it? Sandra asked. After everything, you're just going to let us lose our house? Sandra, I said gently, you were never going to keep that house anyway. Your debt-to-income ratio made foreclosure inevitable. The only question is whether you'll face reality now with my help or later without it. For the first time in years, I felt completely in control of my relationship with my daughter. And for the first time in her adult life, Sandra was seeing her mother as she really was. Not simple, not limited, but powerful beyond anything she'd ever imagined. 3 months later, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop when Sandra walked in. She looked different, older somehow, but also more grounded. Her designer clothes had been replaced by simple, practical outfits, and she carried herself with less artificial confidence, but more genuine dignity. She spotted me at my corner table and approached hesitantly. "Hi, Mom," she said. "Do you mind if I sit down?" I gestured to the empty chair across from me. Of course. She ordered a regular coffee instead of the elaborate specialty drinks she used to favor, and we sat in awkward silence for a moment. "How are things?" I asked. "Different," she said with a small laugh. "Really different." After that confrontation in my dining room, Sandra and Brian had spent 2 weeks in what I can only describe as financial denial. They tried to find alternative solutions, other family members to approach, credit consolidation schemes, even a GoFundMe page that raised exactly $37. But reality has a way of asserting itself, and when their first mortgage payment came due with no resources to cover it, they finally called Margaret Chen. "Working with your financial advisor was humbling," Sandra admitted, stirring her coffee slowly. She didn't sugarcoat anything. Margaret had presented them with the same analysis I'd shown them, but in even starker terms. Their house was already in pre-foreclosure proceedings. Brian's business had no viable clients. Their debt was growing daily with compound interest and late fees. "We followed your conditions," Sandra continued. "All of them. They'd sold the BMW and bought a 3-year-old Honda Civic. The country club membership was canceled. They'd moved out of their expensive house and into a modest rental apartment. Brian had closed his consulting business and taken a job as a project manager with a steady salary. It was like learning to live all over again, Sandra said. I never realized how much of our money was going to things that didn't actually matter. But the most significant change wasn't financial. It was personal. Mom, I owe you an apology, a real one. I waited, letting her find her words. I treated you terribly. For years, I created this image of you as someone who needed my guidance and protection, when really I was the one who needed help, and I was too proud and too stupid to see it. She paused, looking out the window at the street where people were going about, their ordinary lives. When I saw those financial statements, when I realized you'd been managing millions of dollars while I was lecturing you about money, I felt so ashamed. And now? Now I understand that being smart about money isn't about how much you spend or how sophisticated your lifestyle looks. It's about making choices that actually serve your long-term interests. Sandra reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. I keep a budget now. Every expense, every income source, tracked and planned. Margaret taught me how to do it, but more importantly, she taught me why it matters. She showed me pages of careful calculations, modest goals, realistic projections. We're going to be debt-free in 18 months if we stick to the plan. And after that, we're going to start building actual wealth instead of just the appearance of wealth. I nodded approvingly. And how does that feel? Scary sometimes, but also freeing. I don't have to pretend anymore. I don't have to maintain an image that was bankrupting us. She closed the notebook and looked directly at me. I also need to thank you. For what? For loving me enough to let me fail. For not enabling my bad decisions just because it would have been easier. for showing me what real financial strength looks like. The transformation in my daughter was remarkable. The condescending tone was gone, replaced by genuine humility. The artificial sophistication had been stripped away, revealing someone more authentic and, frankly, more likable. "There's something else," Sandra said. "I've been telling people the truth about you." "What truth?" "That my mother is one of the smartest, most financially successful people I know. That I've learned more about money management from you in the past 3 months than I learned in my entire adult life before that." She smiled, and for the first time in years, it looked completely genuine. "Brian and I want to have you over for dinner next week. Nothing fancy, just a simple meal in our simple apartment. But we want to cook for you properly, and we want to hear about your life. Your real life, not the version we made up in our heads." I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. "I'd like that very much." As we prepared to leave, Sandra hesitated. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy? I mean, really happy? Living simply when you could afford anything?" I thought about the question seriously. Sandra, wealth isn't about what you can afford to buy. It's about having the freedom to make choices based on what you actually value instead of what other people expect from you. I gathered my things and stood up. "Your father and I could have lived in a mansion and driven luxury cars, but we valued security, family time, and peace of mind more than impressive possessions. The money was never the goal. It was just a tool to protect what we really cared about." As we walked out of the coffee shop together, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine closeness with my daughter. "I love you, Mom," Sandra said as we reached our cars. "I love you too, sweetheart, and I'm proud of the woman you're becoming." That evening, I called Margaret Chen to update her on Sandra's progress. "It sounds like your strategy worked," she said. "It did, but it was never really about the money. What was it about? Respect. Understanding. The kind of relationship where we see each other as we really are, not as we think we should be." As I hung up the phone, I looked around my simple living room. The same floral couch, the same coffee table with ring stains, the same family photos in simple frames. But now, instead of seeing a cover story for hidden wealth, I saw a reflection of values that had guided my family for decades. I was still the same woman I'd always been. The only thing that had changed was that my daughter finally knew who that woman really was. And that, I realized, was worth more than all the money in the world. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. If this story touched you, please give it a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Stay healthy and value yourselves.